4:31 and we've already got a decent turnout. So why don't I get started again? Again, my name is Brian Rosenberg. I'm the founder of Engage with Kids. Just so you know, you're at the right place. If you're interested in our webinar, everything you need to know about open adoption. And by the way, we will be taking a video presentation and that will be available shortly in the next day or two following this webinar. I do want to let you know that Engage with Kids has been around, gosh, March will be our 7th anniversary. And we've done, I think, a terrific job in the first 5 years of really sharing stories anecdotally at a very high level, what it's like to, for queer men to raise families and to create our families and all that's involved in creating our families. And it wasn't until the latter half of last year that we launched sort of what we call the Engage with Kids Becoming section, in which we really hope, our goal is to really walk with you each step of the way, regardless of what your journey to parenthood is, whether it's through adoption or foster care or surrogacy or co-parenting. We hope that you'll find the content that we have on our website, webinars such as these, to be very helpful for you and helping you navigate your journey. As a dad of a family that was created through a combination of adoption and surrogacy, no one understands more than me just how complicated it is to create our families. And I should show, that's a recent photo of my family right now. My son, Levi, all the way to the left, we picked him up out of the hospital. We brought him home from the hospital on the 6th day of his life, and he's now almost 12 years old. It's hard to believe how quickly time has gone by. So the next slide, I want, in addition to thanking all of you for coming to join us, I want to thank our presenters. So I'm going to skip over first to Paige Knipfer of Love Grown Adoption Consulting. I just recently met Paige in the last month or so, but I can tell you that we share the same philosophy and the same heart about adoption as Molly does as well. So quickly, briefly, after having gone through open adoption twice herself, Paige founded Love Grown Adoption Consulting to use her experience, and she's a compassionate guide and advocate for those seeking to adopt. So we're thrilled to have Paige as part of the Engage with Kids community, helping those who want to navigate adoption do so. Next is my friend, Molly Rampe Thomas. And gosh, I guess, Molly, we've known each other now for several years. I can tell you all that my friend Molly is the founder of Choice Network Adoption, which is seen as a leader in pro-choice and LGBTQ adoptions nationwide. Molly's been doing this work for 10 years and is working hard to do it all different. And again, you guys, you all don't know this maybe, but you have two of the most compassionate, passionate, and really wise people when it comes to adoption and to working with our families. So please take full advantage, ask away any questions that you might have. Speaking of questions, this is a webinar format, which unfortunately means we can't see those of you who are joining the webinar. We can only see our co-presenters. But if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. You can use the Zoom chat functionality or the Q&A. We'll be happy to go through the questions. Now later on, we're going to be joined by another dad who is a much more recent dad of an open adoption, Detorie Walker. And so excited to have him joining us as well. All right, with further ado, why don't I take us to Molly, if you want to go through our agenda for this afternoon, please.
Thank you, Brian, for that very sweet introduction. I'm excited to be doing my first webinar with Paige today. So today, you guys, we're going to be talking about the benefits of open adoption, what closed, semi-open, and open adoption is, how we can successfully navigate open adoption, determine the best arrangement possible, and even more exciting, we're going to have an adoptive dad on to tell his story. So we're excited to have time for that. Paige and I are just going to kind of quickly go through it so we have time for our story and then also to answer questions that you guys have. So this is your space and your time, and we're excited to be here.
Yes, thank you so much. So I'm Paige, and I'm going to just kind of quickly go over open adoption, semi-open adoption, and closed adoption. Majority of adoptions now are open, and that's kind of what most people advocate for if possible. Sometimes it's not always the option, but open adoption does not mean co-parenting. It just means that there is a communication between you and the birth family, and I'm speaking as the adoptive parent because I'm an adoptive parent. And you have an open communication of check-ins. It might consist of visits. It might be FaceTiming. It really looks different depending on everyone involved, and every adoption and family story is different. Semi-open adoption might more mean you're using a website or a private group on a social media account to send updates every month or every year, right? And so it's a little less contact, but it's still open. And closed adoption means that there's no contact at all with biological family and the adoptive parents and the child. It also means that records of the adoptee are sealed. So that's often why, too, even if there is not going to be any communication, maybe one party doesn't want any communication at this point in the time in the adoption, many still advocate to try and keep it open so that those records are not sealed for the adoptee.
So yes, there is so much research that shows the benefits of open adoption. So I would say, the reason why I got into this work is because what we all knew in the past was closed adoption, and what we know now is that closed adoption hurt women, families, children, and communities. So the best adoption agencies out there are going to be really helping you to understand the beauty and the benefits of open adoption. So essentially doing everything all different than what was done in the past. So there's research that has proven benefits for adopted child, adopted parents, and birth parents, but more the research is out there of how harmful the effects of closed adoption were, again, for women, children, families, and communities. And then open adoption allows children to maintain important connections. And those connections include the birth mother and the birth family, but also connections when you're adopting through the foster care system, connections to people like their teachers and their soccer coaches and their neighbors and things like that. So really any type of connection that we can have to family is a gift to our child. And then also the benefit is that it reduces the feeling of abandonment and uncertainty. Essentially, families who come to us say, well, infants feel the same type of abandonment, feeling and uncertainty as a child adopted through the foster care system. And really what we know is that the joke sort of is, when do you tell your child they're adopted? And really it's, you tell them from the moment you leave the hospital. So even as babies, it's always a known fact to them that they are adopted. So yes, there will be those times in their life, like my daughter is 10, and so she is asking more and more questions about her birth mom and even her birth father now. And so there are those feelings of uncertainty and abandonment, but the difference is I now have access to the person who has answers, and I have those answers too. Adoption in the past was built out of secrets and shame, and adoption today is built out of choice and love and connection. And really, it's the only way.
So navigating an open adoption, I kind of always tell people it's like any relationship, right? With a friend or anyone that you have a relationship with. It takes work and effort and energy, and it involves all parties. And so that's something to always keep in mind. It also ebbs and flows, right? So again, with any relationship in your life, people have different things going on in their life. And again, the birth family too is going through different stages of potential grief, right? And so that's something to keep in mind, especially as an adoptive parent. I always try to center and think about it from the perspective of the birth family and also from the perspective of the adoptee. And we kind of just talked about like all the benefits, right? But even access to history of like medical things are really important for an adoptee, or any questions that as your child grows up, they start having, you have that connection, as Molly just mentioned, right? To be able to answer some of those questions. And I also think too, reevaluating that, right? Every year or so, you may want to have a conversation with birth parents and really see what the expectations are, right? Because you want to have some type of agreement. Otherwise, if you don't set those expectations ahead of time, then there's some disappointment, right? And so if you can kind of come to an agreement and reevaluate that, however often you guys have agreed upon, The other thing I always mention too is social media should be included in that. So because it has this new day and age, right, of posting pictures and videos and things like that, that is a conversation you should also be having with birth family on what can be allowed and what should be done as you are sharing photos and videos. The other thing I always say too is to under promise and over deliver. So that's the same with anything in your relationship that you're building with birth parents and your child. Again, you don't want to set someone up for a disappointment in an agreement that you've made. There's a lot of awesome third-party websites you can use too, as you kind of ease into your communication plan in the beginning of your adoption journey. And then it might look, like I said, it looks different for every family. It might be an email account that you send things through. It might be a private site that you send things through. It might be visits. It might be yearly visits. It might be FaceTiming. I know for my children, FaceTiming is what we do often. And I think that is all I was going to mention here. Some of the, and I should probably talk to you about the challenges. So obviously, like I said, with any relationship, there are challenges. And I think that's really where I'm going back to the expectations, right? Of just setting yourself up for success and having those open communication and reevaluating that often. Because like I said, it's going to change. It's not going to look the same as what you agreed upon, especially if you were matched, prior to baby being born. It's going to ebb and flow and change, which is good, and hopefully grow.
All right, great. So I just heard from our dad, our guest presenter, and he's having issues launching on. So just want to give him a minute. Hopefully he'll be joining us any second. In the meantime, I can tell you that as a dad of someone who's fortunately not in an open adoption, which was a decision that was made by the birth mom of a son who's now 12. I mean, I will iterate what Molly said. Levi's known that he's adopted since day one, since we brought him home from the hospital. I forget if it was Molly or Paige who suggested that. And in fact, my husband wrote a short blog post about the story that we tell Levi about how his family came to be. And I'd be happy to share that with folks afterwards if you want. It was a very age-appropriate way in which we were able to bring up the concept of adoption since day one. I see Detorie on the phone now, so I am going to stop talking because you much rather all hear from Detorie. So Detorie, I'm glad you're able to join us. Glad you're able to get in, I should say. Thank you so much. Sorry you had some difficulties, but welcome.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me. I apologize for the difficulties. I was on there. I guess you just couldn't see me, but I could see you guys.
Oh. You were hiding.
So my name is Brian Walker. My husband and I adopted our son this past October. We finalized on October 6th. We met our son, though, 5 days after he was born. He was born April 27th of 2020. So right in the middle of the pandemic. We weren't able to actually go to the hospital. So what we did, we actually met at an Airbnb where we had already arranged to stay at with his mom. We actually met his mom 9 days after our wedding. We were actually on the way back from our honeymoon in Belize, and we were in the airport and received an email about his mom, and we met her that night. And one of the things that my husband and I really, really wanted to make sure was the highlight or a really big focus on our adoption was the fact that we wanted everything to be open. We wanted open communication. We wanted open visits. We wanted our future child we wanted to make sure they knew that they had more than just us, have a birth mom, a birth father who created them and who love and cherish them and who still communicate with him. Our agreement in the beginning was that we would have open communication. She could call, his birth mom could call anytime she wants. We would reach out to her. To this day, we call her, and we're a big family. She actually just came up to visit a couple weeks ago, and this was actually the first time since he was born that she's been able to visit because of the pandemic and the unknowns of everything with travel. And she came, she stayed for 4 nights, 5 days. We really enjoyed ourselves. She was able to hang out with Asin, and she was able to meet our extended family. But it was a really good time. And even with him being as he's only 8-9 months, we always refer to her as his mom. It's not birth mom, or if we're talking to someone, we always refer to him or to his mother as his mom, because she is his mom, and we know that she loves him. We've never met his birth father, but we have his contact information, and we've extended the invite of communication. And whenever he is ready, we will be here and ready as well. But it doesn't come without its struggles of having an open adoption. And I say that because we built a relationship with her to where, we are a family, but every family, they're going to have their issues. There's times where you may not agree. But one thing that's really helped us in our journey is really setting some boundaries, whether that be boundaries with the times of the night you call, or boundaries with what we want shared on social media, or what we want his future to look like. One of the big things that just recently came up was his name. We actually changed his name whenever we received his birth certificate, because my grandpa passed away, and to honor him, we changed that name. And we, of course, chose her, but whenever she came this past weekend, the weekend she came, she did refer to him as his birth name. And we had a moment there where we had to remind her, hey, while you are his mom and you have every right to call him the name that you named him, it's really crossing the boundary with us that you call him. And it was just a healthy conversation. And when we moved forward, she understood, and she doesn't call him that anymore. But it's a beautiful arrangement that we have. If it wasn't for her, we wouldn't have our family, and we're so grateful and thankful that we do. And we really want our son to always grow up knowing that he came from her, and we want him to also have a relationship with his brothers. He's got 5 brothers that we speak to at least once a week. We talk to his brothers and his mom, so he knows all of them. He gets excited when he sees them, and he can wave and tell them bye-bye now. So it's really exciting, especially for them too, because we were fearful that they would take, and with our son not being there, we were scared they would think that there was a reason that they were there with their mom and he wasn't. But it's really turned out to be a blessing that we were paired with her, and that we've been able to grow our family through adoption and open adoption at that. I think that the hardest part of our adoption process, though, is the actual signing over of whenever his mom signed over her rights. A lot of people will tell you that adoption is beautiful, and adoption is beautiful, but the way that I personally describe adoption it's the most beautiful heartbreak that you'll ever experience in life. Because we were actually I was with his mom. I sat beside her when she signed over her rights to parent Asin, and it was the most beautiful heartbreak. Beautiful in the sense that we know that this is one more chapter that's over now. We can all breathe a sigh of relief, but it's heartbreak because our hearts broke for her, knowing that she wasn't able to give him everything that she thought and knew he deserved. But going past it and forward, it's really a blessing that we were able to adopt and have Paige's help along the way. Actually, Paige is a big part of our story and the reason that we are dads to Asin now. So thank you, Paige, for that. Whenever we were going through our process, I would say that also a big thing was having someone to call to that was an expert in the field, and someone that you could bounce ideas off of and questions, such as is this appropriate? Is this not appropriate? Or should we do this? And Paige was really a sounding board for that. So thank you for that. As I'm sitting here looking at me now, but that's really the gist of our journey. It was the most beautiful heartbreak, but we're so thankful that we can have an open adoption and that we're still navigating it. And we learn every day something new or different ways to do things, and we're never going to stop learning. So that's our story.
There we go. That's what we're waiting for, Detorie.
So he's got a little mud on his face.
Oh, what a beauty.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. Molly and Paige, I feel like I'm sharing the stage here with you. Do either of you want to take it from here, or?
Yeah, well, first I was going to see if there's anybody who has questions. Now is the time to ask. I think that Brian said that in the beginning, but you can enter him into the chat feature or the Q&A, and usually we have a bunch, but we don't have any. Detorie, I just wanted to thank you so much for your story. I am 10 years into an open adoption, and so I know all about the beauty. I love how you said the adoption is a beautiful heartbreak. I'm going to be stealing that from you. It's really wonderful. You know, I feel the same way. I created my agency actually after being in the delivery room with my daughter's birth mother. And when she handed me her baby, just seeing the pain in her eyes, you know, it's like, it's something I'll never forget. And so, you know, I tell people I do everything in honor of her. And so I love how you explained that. And I think it's a really beautiful thing. You know, we talked about the benefits of open adoption, and really, I think when families come to us at first, what they're concerned about is just that you know, I feel like the world portrays women as like these villains or something. You know, it's like we don't know anything about birth mothers. Like I tell our families, we hear all these stories of all these celebrities who have adopted, but we never hear anything about their birth mothers. And it's a story, you know, it's like, so people come with so much fear that it's going to be co-parenting or she's going to want the baby back, and but all of those, it can just be like, it's like all of those fears fall aside when the woman who's chosen you sits across the table from you, and she's real and she's human, and all of a sudden all the boundaries you want to set and all the rules you weren't going to break are like, what does she want? I'll give it to her because I love her. She chose me, you know? So I love how you explain that. Thank you. And I think we do have some questions, Brian.
We do.
So the first one was...
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Okay, the first one is, how long does the typical adoption process take for an infant? Paige, do you want to take that?
I can, sure. So I would say, so I live in rural Wisconsin, and I would say if you're in a small agency, it may take several years. And that's why I kind of started Love Grown. So I connect with agencies and attorneys across the country to allow families hopefully to present more often than they might with their agency. The other thing to factor in is if you have specifications, right? If you're gender specific, for example, sometimes the expecting mom doesn't want to know the gender, or she doesn't know the gender at the time that she's choosing a family. And so that's just kind of limiting your options, right? Or your chances of presenting to an expecting mom if you are gender specific. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but again, that's going to contribute to potentially a longer wait time. If you have a lower budget too, sometimes that's going to have a little bit a longer wait, because obviously there are some costs with adoption as far as paying for a caseworker and legal representation for the expecting mom, and then a separate caseworker and attorney representation for you. What else do I always tell families? So my goal is to have you matched within a year. The other thing I should mention too, with COVID, that has, I feel like, made things much slower. So I would say at least 18 months now, if not 2 years. We're just seeing less birth rates in the United States too, as you see birth rates decline and teen pregnancies declining, which is awesome. You obviously see adoptions decline as well. So that's kind of my long-winded answer of that.
And Detorie, actually, they're asking specifically too how long your process took. Could you go ahead and answer?
I can. Our process, from my understanding, was not typical at all. We completed our home study in January, and our son was born April the 27th. So it was just a few short months. We had been given the expectation, though, that it would take 18 to 24 months, but the universe just told us that our son was going to come out sooner. So it was about a 3-month process for us. It all happened really fast.
Wow.
The next question is, what if you're told the adoption needs to be a closed adoption? Paige, do you want that, or I can take it?
Yeah, I can take that too. So yeah, there are obviously extenuating circumstances that this does occur, right? And that are totally valid. I really still try and advise, if you cannot seal the adoptee's records, to not have them sealed. Again, it just has that information for a child in the future. And it's something that I was not aware of to even ask for when I was going through our adoption journey the first time. The other thing I always recommend too is if you can get the original birth certificate with the original birth parents' names on it. I think about it from a birth parent perspective and an adoptee perspective. And I often think if I were an adoptee, that would be something that is very important to me. And a lot of adult adoptees have said that is something that would have been important to them. So yes, it does happen. And again, there's extenuating circumstances that may be advised by the caseworker that you're working with or the agency. But if you can try and get some of those records, at least for your child, and any information, I was concerned that I had heard stories of birth parents kind of disappearing. And so in our first adoption, I kept notes on literally everything she told me, what food she liked, anything, because I was afraid of that happening. Thankfully, it didn't. But I just kept anything and everything I could because it might be meaningful to your child and you don't know.
Yeah, I love that. I think also there's a piece where I think you can sometimes also create a little bit of openness. So even if it is closed, I always tell families that you tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and you tell it as they can come. So if your baby came to you through a really heartbreaking story, you never want to say, like, I remember one of my best friends, their parents said that his birth mother was a ballerina. And so she would play in she did circuses, or it was something like that. And so he believed that forever. And so when they said, no, she really didn't, we just told you that to comfort you. And he was like, well, what else is a lie? So it's, you really truly want to tell the whole truth as it can come to them. You never, they deserve to know the truth about their past and how they came to be. And also sometimes we say things like, I have a special candle that I bring out on my daughter's birthday. I light that candle every year. Now that she's 10, she's like, we have to light the candle. We light it, so that we can show the presence of her mother there. So we honor her at that time. So now when she was younger, she never knew. And then when she got to be 8 or 9 and it really mattered to her, she was like, why do you always light that candle on my birthday? I'm like, I light it for your mom, Also gifts that were given to her, or her hospital bracelet. I kept all of that. I never had her wear her outfits. I never had her open the bear she got. I never had her wear the necklace she got her. I kept all of that so that she can have it then someday when it's really going to matter to her. So we also say things, that you can say, we don't know this information, but let's write it down together and we'll keep it in a special box. And sometime when we get to meet her, we can ask her all of these questions. That's actually really common for birth fathers because we don't have a lot of information about them. Or really there's, we tell families, you can say, go under the moon and say, we don't know where she is or who she is, but we know we all are under the same moon together. So we're in the same earth, in the same place. And let's just tell her how much we love her and maybe she'll hear us. And so you just really are encouraging this love and connection any way that you can, in any creative way that you can. So there is still that piece, that you can have to try to build that.
I'm going to just add too, I keep if you have a closed adoption, I also advise keeping a bin and just storing kids' artwork, random clothing that you might have kept, just kind of all the keepsake stuff that you might keep for yourself or for your child too. I would, keep another bin for birth parents if it is closed, because someday if they do come in the picture, you have this bin of like all this stuff of this kiddo's life. And I also do that with my kiddo's birth parents. Every so often I compile like artwork and Shutterfly books and randomness, right? And I send it to the birth parents just as another thing for open adoption.
Wow. This is really great. Thank you so much, Paige and Molly. I love the response to that. So we have some more questions, Molly.
Yep, it says, does Choice Arc and other agencies work with the county? As of now in California, they are not accepting adoption applications due to COVID. Obviously, this is related to finances and costs. Thank you. So I am an infant placing agency, but I will tell you there's other ways. So Paige is on here today as an example of other ways when it comes to costs. Infant placing agencies are always going to be, because we're all encompassing in the work that we do. But there are options like working with a consultant, but you have to make sure it's a consultant that understands and is going to center the birth mother. That's so important, that they're LGBTQ inclusive. You still have to have the same type of things that you're going to be looking for adoption agencies. Make sure you're looking for them for consultants as well. As far as foster care, we have great foster care experts on Gays with Kids. So I think that talking with them would be important. I do not I can actually only home study families in Ohio. I can work with families from all over, but I wouldn't be able to work with a family in California. But I just feel like saying to you, don't get deterred. Just if they say no, then ask what other agencies are accepting applications now, and just keep moving forward, especially if your heart is for foster care. I am like, go, go, go. These babies are going to need us so bad. These kids are going to need us so bad. Right now, they cannot be found due to COVID. But as soon as they start getting connections and going back to school, the doors are going to be busting at the seams for foster care. So go now and reach out to Gays with Kids, and we can connect you to the experts there for sure. And just speaking of cost, another question is, what is the typical cost? The average national cost for adoption is $42,000. On average, my families are paying anywhere from $30,000 to $55,000. Paige can probably vouch that it's about right.
Yeah, that's perfect.
And on Gays with Kids, we actually break down the cost. I'll be happy to include it in a post email to everyone. We break down what the various line items that's involved in those costs. You can see right up front.
This question is, upon birth of the child, how long is the typical finalization process to transfer legal guardianship? Paige, are you cool if I take this one too? Sorry, I don't mean to be overtaking, but on average, it's anywhere from 3 to 6 months, I would say. And it really depends on the state where your birth mother is coming from or your state. So yeah, usually 3 to 6 months from time of placement till finalization. Detorie, what is your finalization date? What was yours?
My finalization was October the 6th, 2020.
Was it 3 months, 6 months? How long after
It
placement?
was 6 months. It was 6 months.
Yeah, that's probably pretty typical. Thank you. This says, do agencies talk to each other, or should we work with multiple agencies and foster systems to improve chances and timeline? Paige, you want to take this one?
I can. So some states, depending on their laws, actually won't let you license to be foster care parent and pursuing adoption simultaneously. So I would pay attention to that. Often, I know for like my home state, you have to choose kind of, are you fostering or are you trying to adopt domestic infant, which is kind of my area of expertise. So that's kind of going to vary based on what you're choosing to do.
Paige, can you explain? I think that we perhaps didn't make it clear enough. I didn't make it clear enough in the introduction. What's the difference between an agency and a consulting firm or consultant? Do you guys mind taking that?
Yeah, so an agency is a licensed entity that does, and some agencies are different, but typically they do a home study, which is your stamp of approval to adopt. And they may also be a placement agency, meaning they have expecting moms come through their door and they help match that expecting mom with a prospective adoptive family. They also work with prospective adoptive families in that home study process So typically that includes not only background checks, but like the education piece. Hopefully the agency is doing a lot of education to prepare that prospective adoptive family prior to being matched with an expecting mom. A consultant, which is me, I am licensed, but it's very different licensing than an agency. And I am, I don't know, I kind of joke, but I'm kind of like the matchmaker. So I work with agencies and attorneys across the US, and I educate and help prospective adoptive families match with them. Because I think we got that question too of like, should I register with multiple agencies? And I always advise that, especially with COVID right now. And like I said, we kind of talked about not seeing as many expecting mom cases. I mean, doing your research, as Molly talked about though, right, of like the agencies that you want to work with, but registering with multiple places allows you just more opportunity. And then what else was I going to say about differences between a consultant? Basically, the reason I started Love Grown is I felt like some agencies and my experience, I learned a lot of things the hard way. And kind of as Detorie shared his story, there is a lot of brokenness from this beauty. Like I am a mom because of adoption and it is amazing, but there were a lot of hard parts of this that I was not prepared for. And I felt like my agency could have done a better job of. And so that's really my passion, is the education piece and preparing prospective adoptive families. But yes, I'm also kind of the matchmaker, so to speak, in connecting prospective families with places all over the United States instead of just their agency that they might be working with in the state that they reside.
Yeah, I think the question you were referring to, I deleted it too soon. Dang it. This was my first time doing this. Sorry, Brian. But they asked, like, do agencies and consultants and foster care agencies communicate with each other? And sadly, the answer to that is no. There are 3,000 adoption agencies in the United States. Only 1 in 4 adoption agencies are openly inclusive to LGBTQ families, which is why Gays with Kids was created, which is why the Human Rights Campaign Seal of Approval was created. So it's really important that you do the research for families. There's only, out of 3,000, there's only 6 of us recognized by the pro-choice movement. And I would just say the pro-choice piece is important to me because I really believe that a woman cannot make a good adoption plan unless she has access to all options legally available to her first. She shouldn't be forced into a plan to make an adoption. A forced plan hurts children, women, families, communities. So I think that, Blake, what you're sort of asking is, like, I think it was Blake who asked this, but it's important to interview agencies. I think the cool thing is you can start with Gays with Kids, you can expand to HRC, they have more. And then you can also sprinkle in talking with people like Paige, to consider that as an option too. The foster care system is its own entity. And there are, Gays with Kids has webinars specifically on foster care, specifically on fees. So they're talking about, you're asking really great questions, and I wish the answer could be different, but unfortunately you sort of like tie yourself to one agency, or sometimes you can do multiple agencies and use a consultant. But yeah, the questions you're asking are really great questions when you begin to interview agencies, I would say. Because another one you just asked is, if you do you typically have to pay an agency if they don't end up matching you? Say, for example, you register with multiple agencies, would you only pay the one that matches you with a baby? And again, that's an important question to ask, because many times you're paying agencies for their infant adoption program. So even if you would find your match on your own, they're still doing the same work that they would normally do, and they're there for you for the lifetime of the journey. So, but I would say Paige probably has a different experience because her families are kind of signing up with multiple agencies, and so it could look a little different. So Paige, would you want to answer that piece of the question? Just
yeah. So oftentimes an agency uses a consultant for many reasons, but one might be they have an expecting mom walk through their door and the expecting mom is looking for something specific. Maybe she wants a stay-at-home parent. Maybe she wants a same-sex couple. And maybe it's an agency that doesn't work with same-sex couples, which I love that, because then they contact me and I can connect them with families that can present her with those profiles. An expecting mom may walk through the door and say, I want to see 50 profiles, and that agency does not have 50 waiting families registered with their agency. So they reach out to consultants to get more profiles for her. Maybe she's looked at the profiles through that agency and didn't pick anyone, and she wants to see more. The other oftentimes too is it might be a particularly harder case too. Oftentimes families are scared when maybe she's early in pregnancy or incarcerated. Oftentimes they send those cases to consultants for other families because their families didn't want to present to that particular case. So that's where oftentimes I see cases. I also work with some agencies who prefer to work with my families if their pool of waiting families is low, because they know the education I provide. And to be honest, the agency or attorney just doesn't have the time to answer questions and I hate to be that way, but handhold a prospective family through the process. And they know that I'm there and that I will do that. And so that's often why too they work with me. So hopefully that kind of answers, like, I get that question a lot of like, why would an agency, be sending cases to a consultant, for example?
Blake, let us know if we didn't answer that question for you. Another question Blake had is, do most infant adoptions mean that you will take the baby home right away from the hospital, or is it common for there to be some time before you can take the baby home? Paige, do you want me to answer that, or?
I can take it. It really depends on the agency and the expecting mom. So I always say too, if she's invited you to the hospital, it is a privilege for you to be there, and it's awesome. And so sometimes, right, an adoption is, especially if it's open, you may have even gone to her ultrasound prior. You may have met her while she was pregnant. You may have had like ice cream or coffee or lunch or whatever with her prior to actually being at the hospital. And then yes, depending on state laws, but most of the time I see where either they're invited to the prospective family is invited to the hospital, or they arrive a day or two later. Maybe sometimes baby comes early, or the family's in another state and needs to fly there. And then, so you do, if you are flying to another state, there is something called interstate compact. It's basically permission for you to leave that state and bring baby home to your home state. So usually that's anywhere from 2 business days to 2 weeks, where you're staying in the state that the baby was born in for that permission. And then you bring baby home to your house. And then the person who did your home study does these post visits. So they just check in to make sure things are going okay, baby's doing okay. And then right before that, like I said, you probably have 3 to 4 visits depending on when finalization occurs. Finalization is that final part of the adoption where baby becomes legally yours. Sometimes though, I've seen too where the expecting mom didn't choose a family and she gave birth at the hospital, and now the agency is, and this happens a handful of times a year, and the agency is trying to find a prospective family. So sometimes too, it's very, very quick, where the prospective family has been chosen and they need to get to XYZ state, or maybe it's within their state and maybe baby has already been there for a couple of days. Sometimes too, prospective families choose to have baby placed into temporary care, which is also an option, or they might, like I said, still be at the hospital or in the NICU potentially. And then that's when the prospective family would come into the picture, if that makes sense.
Great, thank you. We got a question, do consultants have the seal of approval from HRC? And they do not. Adoption agencies, I believe, are the only ones who can get the seal of approval, and foster care agencies too, not county, I think private foster care agencies. But the HRC seal of approval is really important. Start at the innovative level and then work down. I got the innovative level. It is not easy to do. I really think it's important that you choose agencies that have the seal of approval, because we're taking the extra step, and it is, it's important to do that. It's a commitment to LGBTQ families, and it takes me months to get my seal, and I have to do it every year, but it's important to me. I refuse to sit on panels with agencies who don't have it. So there's that.
I'm just going to say, from Engage with Kids perspective, absolutely. Yeah. So we are very proud and honored with the agencies that we work with, the family building organizations that we work with, from the adoption and foster care agencies. Our goal is really just to create content so that you guys, like if you decide you want to become parents to a child through adoption, through open adoption, you can just go to our site and read literally the entire process. What we don't do is therefore we don't have relationships with everybody. The few organizations that we do have relationships with absolutely have the HRC Seal of Approval. But as Molly mentioned earlier, if these organizations aren't local to you or you need to expand your network, then absolutely strongly encourage you to go to HRC. In terms of consultants, certainly we're going to recommend Paige as being someone who would certainly pass the test. And you'd want to just do the same homework that you would do, as Molly mentioned, talking to the adoption agencies that you would with your consultants as well.
Brian, I think one thing would be important too, just because I would say though that we talk about on Gays with Kids, we talk about independent adoptions and agency adoptions, but a consultant is really considered an independent adoption, if I'm correct, Paige, right? Because families still do have to have an agency to get a home study, or would you be considered independent too? I mean, every family who's a consultant still has to have an agency to get a home study. So it's just whether or not you believe that you want to add on that additional consulting piece. What I love about Paige, and that's going to be a little different than other consultants, is Paige actually has access to birth moms. And so she can present you. And I think that's like important to make sure. And then she's also training on top of that. So there's consultants out there that actually don't have access to birth moms. They're just kind of like connecting, but that is one piece that Paige brings to the table that I think is really important. So I just wanted to say that. The next question is, how should we expect or prepare for the home study? Again, we have Gays with Kids has a full webinar, I believe, on the home study, but I will quickly talk about it because I home study families. The home study is a series of documents, training, and then interviews. So the documents include medicals, background checks, fire inspections, reference letters, financial documents, a review of your home. So sometimes people think the home study is actually just a study of your home, but it actually includes all of it. The home is just a very small piece of it. So the documents you have to collect and get done for you by doctors and the fire department and things like that. Also, we need like marriage licenses and social security cards and all of that. So there's just a big stack of documents that you do. The training, which it can take anywhere from, I would say, 10 to 25 hours or so of training that families get. And then the final step is interviews with an adoption assessor or social worker. And that interview kind of is the thing that just kind of gathers everything and creates the home study. Every family has to have a home study in order to adopt. So that's the first step in your process. If you need to find a home study agency in your state, HRC is the place to start. And then, do adoptive parents have to worry about the adoption not finalizing once they have been matched and take the baby home? Paige, you want to answer that?
So my short answer is yes. So every state is different when termination of parental rights is signed. So that can range anywhere from 48 hours to several days. Wisconsin, it's 30 days, which is where I reside. Like I said, it varies on how long it is until she and birth father sign termination of parental rights. So yes, there is that chance of her deciding to parent, which is her right to do so. It's her right to hold baby. It's her right to take baby home if she wanted to. So that's definitely something that comes into play with adoption and your journey as well.
All right, are there any other questions? No, well, Molly, Paige, thanks so much for lending us your expertise, your thought leadership, your guidance, your support, for being a part of the Gays with Kids Parents Path to Fatherhood, and to helping educate us. We really, really appreciate it. Detorie, well, what can I say? Having a dad who's there and showing us your adorable baby, hugely appreciate it. I think you help bring home the message to everyone, which is that what I like to bring home is, look, chances are you're going to encounter some kind of challenge along your way. I can't tell you, Engaged with Kids, we have shared stories of hundreds, if not thousands at this point, of parents who become dads through adoption, through the foster care system. And while many of us have had experience some kind of a challenge or something that we've had, some kind of hurdle we've had to overcome, what we all have at the end of the day is a family that we can call our own. So keep with it. I promise you, you'll get there. If you feel overwhelmed, come and read all the stories that we have of dads who've done this process beforehand. And hopefully it'll help you feel less overwhelmed. You too can experience your dream as well. Thank you once again, Paige, Molly, and Detorie. Really appreciate it.